Hi. Today I want to speak to you about the current events that we've seen witnessed out and played out in Charlottesville and similar events going on around the country. One might ask, how is it that in 2017 we're still seeing these displays of violence, bigotry, and hatred? You would think that if human beings who were around for 200,000 years, as the evolutionists tell us, that we would at least by now have learned how to live in peace with each other. Now these events are just one more proof against this whole theory of evolution. Human nature does not evolve. It does not change. Yes, we can advance in knowledge and technology, but the heart of man does not advance. Prejudice and racism derives from the seed of iniquity residing in all of us, which is then developed by social and cultural climates during developing years. A cursory study of world history attests to this universal flaw in the human character, regardless of what corner of the world you look at. It all started now when the people of the world spoke in one language and decided to build a tower to heaven to make their names great. God looked down and said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. You can find that in Genesis 11:6. Nothing would be impossible for them if they were in unity, but their hearts were evil, self-centered. Their unity would result in evil works, building a tower to make their names great. To prevent this, God then scattered them and confused their language. And ever since, we've had ethnic and people groups that have different languages. They look differently. They have different lifestyles and traditions and cultures. We have devolved into tribalism and factions. The events that we saw in Charlottesville simply reveal to us what is still in the human heart. But Jesus taught us in Matthew 5:19, he said, out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, and slander. And Jeremiah told us in 17:9, he said, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. How wicked can it be? I just heard a report that the country of Iceland has totally eradicated Down syndrome from its infant population. But not because they found a cure, but because they simply abort the children with Down before they're born, in the name of choice and progress. Is that progress or is that evil here in 2017? You see, the heart of man never evolves. It can only be transformed by God himself. God said, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. In Ezekiel 36:26. You see, the unregenerate heart of man is beyond repair. There must be a heart transplant. Where people are led by their deceitful heart, you see racism, prejudice, bigotry, and every kind of evil. That is the natural state of man. The more we come to realize that, the less we'll be surprised by events such as Charlottesville, Ferguson, Baltimore, and the like. That is the spirit of this world, where Satan has been given limited dominion, and he certainly is wreaking havoc among the people today. So what is the answer? We have been blessed as a nation as no other nation has in all of world history because of what Dennis Prager calls the American Trinity. You carry it around in your pocket every day. Actually, it's on every coin printed in America. I know this coin is a little bit big. Maybe it's a product of inflation, but let's talk about this for a minute. The answer is understanding this American Trinity, not to be confused now with the Holy Trinity of the Bible. Just take out a coin and look at it, and there you have it. You have liberty, you have trust in God, and on the other side you have e pluribus unum, or out of many one, or one nation under God. Let me explain. First is liberty. American Christians are a doubly blessed people when it comes to liberty, because first of all, we have been set free. We have eternal liberty. We enjoy from the consequences of our freedom from the consequences of our sin, and all the negative stuff that we've done because of Jesus Christ, who gave himself on Calvary's cross for us. But we also have civic liberty. Not only eternal liberty, but civic liberty for this temporal life, signified by the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. So there is no one on earth more blessed than the American Christian. And our liberty is an ordered liberty. Liberty in America is not freedom to do whatever you want, but rather the freedom to do what we ought, as taught by our Judeo-Christian tradition. Liberty is not licentiousness or anarchy. Let us not be foolish but wise. Many on the extreme left use our liberty to promote anarchy, which always leads to tyranny. The irony could not be clearer concerning this Antifa movement, which claims to be anti-fascism, while in fact they are promoting fascism. Whenever you see that clown mask, the Guy Fawkes or Vendetta mask, understand the rebellious and demonic spirit inspiring it. Be not deceived. Their issue is not Confederate memorials or racism or even wealth distribution. Their real issue is rebellion against any duly established authority. That Guy Fawkes, by the way, he was the intermission surgeon who tried to blow up the British Parliament back in 1605. And the mask was now brought back into vogue in the 1980s by a novel entitled A V for Vendetta. Anyway, liberty is not licentiousness. The French had their revolution just after we had ours. Robespierre and his Committee of Public Safety, notice how civil it always sounds, how they were rebelling against established civic authority as well as divine authority. Their revolution ended with blood in the streets, symbolized by the guillotine. Their motto was liberty, equality, fraternity. No God. Our war for independence, on the other hand, was rebellion against civic authority because of the perception that King George was not ruling under the authority of God, but rather on his own authority. Some of the mottos of our war were rebellion against tyrants is obedience to God, no king but Jesus, and an appeal to heaven. You see, we weren't throwing off a king, we were just exchanging King George for King Jesus. Alexis de Tocqueville, a French noble who came to the United States in 1831 to see why our revolution was so successful while the French Revolution was such a failure. He was amazed to see how in America, government and religion were partners in liberty, whereas in France, religion was abandoned. That was the difference. The war for independence created the longest existing republic under one constitution, producing ordered liberty and a land blessed above all others. Truly an exceptional nation. John Quincy Adams, he told us, he said, the highest glory of the American Revolution was this, that it connected in one indissoluble bond the principles of civil government with the principles of Christianity. It was a chip off the old block, his dad, John Adams, who said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the governing of any other. And on the Missouri State Senate chamber, we see a quote from Abraham Lincoln, who said, and I quote, "Nothing is politically correct that is morally wrong." You see, liberty is not granted to us by the government or by the generosity of the state, as JFK told us, but by the hand of God. In fact, our Declaration of Independence states clearly that we have been endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that they are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the purpose of government, then, our founding fathers would tell us, is to secure those rights, not to dispense them, but to secure those rights. Ordered liberty tells us that our Creator never gave us the right to tear down a monument in Durham, North Carolina, because one might find it offensive. That's a crime. If a statue is to come down, that's a decision to be made by the village or the city council or the organized expression of, quote, we the people. That's ordered liberty. Personally, I don't believe any of our history should be expunged, even reminders of our national sins and our failures. Let's not be revisionists and be deceived into thinking that now we've evolved to become an enlightened people while our ancestors were simple-minded and evil. Remember, human nature doesn't change. Ordered liberty begins with respect for truth and for one another as created equally in the image of God, regardless of race, creed, religion, or even sex, or one's understanding or misunderstanding of gender and sex. Why? Because of the second in our American Trinity, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. At a time, our founding fathers, we were anything but the United States. It was 13 different colonies with different religions, ethnic identities, customs, cultures. We could have been 13 different countries, but our founders had the wisdom to know that if they were going to defeat England, the world's greatest superpower at the time, we would all have to be able to unite. But how could we when we were so different, especially those from the north and those from the south? Well, as Providence would have it, there just happened to be preachers like Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield who went riding on horseback all along the East Coast preaching that we are one nation under Christ. That was our shared identity. That was the banner we could rally around to declare no king but Jesus. So then our many cultures, our many religions, and our many ethnic identities, we could become Christians, Americans all, because it is now the Judeo-Christian culture that brings us together out of many, one. Because human nature doesn't change, that is still the answer to our divisions and our race issues. Abraham Lincoln taught us the Bible lesson that a house divided cannot stand. And he said nothing will be impossible for us if we are united in heart, mind, and purpose. Nothing good is possible as long as we continue to push identity politics that divide us into competing groups, in which case we will be destroyed from within. As far as God is concerned, there are only two races, the saved and the unsaved, the redeemed and the lost. The Apostle Paul tells us in Colossians 3:11, he says, here there is not Greek or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all in all. President Teddy Roosevelt told us that here in America, there is no room for hyphenated Americans. You see, it's not about identifying with the life you left behind, but about identifying with this brand new future as an American, with an American spirit, joining with others pursuing the same happiness secured by our Declaration. And I know a black pastor who gets insulted if you call him an African American. He said, I'm not an African American, I'm an American. I've never been to Africa, my parents have never been to Africa, I don't know anybody in Africa, so don't call me an African American. He said, you want to call me black American? He said, I'm good with that. He goes, but don't call me an African American, because that I'm not. I was somewhat taken aback by his remarks, but as I thought about it later, it actually made perfectly good sense. We can find unity in our relationship as we identify as Americans and abandon the sin of our human nature seen in factions and dissensions, according to Galatians 5:20. You see, modern progressivism is an ideology set at dividing Americans from our past and from one another. It is the antithesis of the idea expressed in the motto, e pluribus unum, out of many one. It dictates out of one, make many. That is the essence of identity politics. And I believe it is driven by a spirit set at bringing division and disorder and ultimately conquest. And finally, the third element of the American Trinity we find perhaps the most important, our trust in God. When we put our trust in God, we submit our plans, our hopes, and our dreams to one who has blessed this nation as no other nation has ever been blessed with a peace and prosperity unseen throughout the rest of the world. George Washington, in 1789, in his inaugural address, he spoke a transcendent truth to the generations when he said, the propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right, which heaven itself has ordained. And the scriptures assure us in Psalm 33:12 that blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. See, no one can objectively review the history of our nation without concluding that throughout our history there has always been an invisible hand of providence that has enabled us to become a more perfect union with every generation, with every trial and every test we've ever encountered as a nation. As much as we venerate the idea of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, our ultimate trust is not in the people or even in the Constitution, but rather in the God of the people who inspired the authors of our Constitution. See, judgment begins in the house of the Lord. And if we are to see the same liberty that our parents passed on to us, passed on down to the next generation, then we must repent of the works of our sinful nature. That's our factions which produce dissensions, that party spirit, that group think. Then we will start seeing one another as equals by the hand and the power of the love of God. It certainly will come about, for I read it in his book, and I just want to be sure I'm part of it. It tells us in Revelation 7:9, he said, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude, that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne. They were wearing white robes and holding palm branches in their hands. And they cried out in a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb.'" What we have seen in Charlottesville and cities throughout our nation was not dazzling robes of white washed in the blood of the Lamb, but rather stains of red human blood spilled in demonic anger. It must begin in the church. We must be one nation under God. Let the revival begin now in our own hearts. Let the Lord's Prayer be answered. The night before he was crucified, he asked one thing. He said that they might be one, even as we are one. I in them and you in me, so that the world might be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me, Father, and have loved them, even as you've loved me. In John 17:22 through 23. You see, we cannot separate three parts of the American Trinity, liberty, out of many, e pluribus unum, or trust in God, without destroying the nation itself, in the same way that I can't separate them on this coin without destroying the coin. We must once again rededicate ourselves to the one who gave himself for us, and to the cause for which he died, the redemption of mankind. We must stand uncompromisingly for the essentials, principles of life, marriage, and religious liberties. We must uphold the American Trinity and understand that that is going to be the answer to Charlottesville and all the other issues that we have going on in the country. We must pray like it all depends on God, and work like it all depends on us, until we see a nation that, instead of singing "God Bless America," we will turn it around and start singing and living a life that says, "America, bless God." Yes, the answer to Charlottesville, our racial issues, all comes down to the American Trinity. In God we trust, liberty, one nation under God, out of many, one. So whenever you think about it, or you get into a discussion with anyone, just pull out a coin, and there you have your own sermon outline to explain the answers to today's problems. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care, and God bless.